most of the time when we try to make a change in our life, it literally feels like our brain is fighting against us. I used to sit there and tell myself that I just don't have the discipline, or that the goals that I'm setting for myself just aren't meant for me because I don't want them enough. But then I started to learn more about how our brain is actually built for survival, and it started to make sense. It clicked why, even when I'm trying to make a positive change, like get healthier, build a skill, build a business, my mind is pushing back. And so in this video, I really want to explain to you why the growth feels so uncomfortable, and that it's actually your identity that's pulling you back, and that doing the opposite of what your brain is telling you to do is actually the path forward. And in case this is your first time on this channel, my name is Marvin, and I've used self-development for the last 10 years to advance my sales career through things like productivity, leadership, and of course, health itself. So we'll just jump straight into it. And so like I said, your brain is built for survival. And to really understand this, you have to look at this from a point of evolution. Okay, this is your brain. Okay, we're just gonna run with it. Very simple, your brain is built for two things. It's predictable outcomes and energy efficiency. Okay, just remember, if you remember this, the rest of the video will make a lot more sense if you look at it from this standpoint. And let's say predictable. In your mind, this is safety. Safety is survival. Why? Because of how we evolved. You know, back in the day, cavemen, hunters, gatherers, whatever we were, every day must have been just absolute madness. You know, you need to go out there, hunt your food, otherwise you'll die. And you're not just hunting some little rabbit, no, you're hunting wild animals that also evolved to obviously defend themselves. So, put it very simply, your brain was constantly scanning for any sort of change in environment, because some panther could just pounce out of nowhere, and looking for ways to save your energy, because fighting a panther ain't the easiest thing in the world. And so if we can make other things not as exhausting, then we'll do that to save your energy for the big boss fight. Put simply. Okay, now the issue is that since those days, your brain hasn't really changed. And so that's why even in today's world, it's still constantly scanning for these things of change and keeping you efficient. That's why habits run our lives. That's why it's so easy for us to go into autopilot mode day in, day out, because that's what your brain knows will keep you safe. So in other words, this is basically what you need to, this is the formula for your brain. Change is literally a uncertainty in your brain. We know that part. But and the uncertainty then in your brain's mind is actually a threat. It rings the alarm bells, whoa, 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 okay? And so the unfortunate thing is that your brain doesn't know the difference between positive and negative experiences. Change is change, and therefore a threat is a threat. So when you're now telling yourself that, okay, this is the year, I'm going to become healthy, I'm going to become like one of those guys that I see on Instagram training for their high rocks or for their next fight, whatever it might be. If you've not really been anywhere near that person up until this point, your brain is telling yourself to just chill. Yeah, that's not you. I'm sensing a change here, and so I'm going to keep you safe. You don't want that. Now, like I said, it's great for threats, maybe back in the day. In today's world, not really that efficient, and so you have to know how to work around this. I myself, can heavily relate to this. Told myself, let's start making content, putting yourself out there. Consciously, I might tell myself I've got good information, but there's another level to this, which unfortunately also fights against us, which is your ego. And what your ego doesn't like to do is contradict itself. Yeah, just as a rule of thumb in general, we hate having to go against our own word and what we believe about ourselves. And so you see this all the time. I've read examples in the book, but I'll just use myself. I'm telling myself I'm gonna build this personal brand, try and uplift people through self-development, help them in their careers, etc. Usually before sales, I was very much, and still now to be honest, I'm the chilled guy. One who's a bit more should we say, in the background, and definitely don't have any reference when it comes to this sort of online space, you know. So consciously, yeah, I really want to do this. Subconsciously, my ego, let's keep you safe. It's much better. The safety is having this dream. It's better for you to just have the dream but be unknown rather than to put yourself out there and maybe even be disliked. You know, that's the way that your brain is literally analyzing you trying to make these differences. You know, better for you to just have this idea of running a marathon than to tell people you're going to run a marathon and then you don't pull through with it. You know, whatever. You can apply this to any sort of example. Just remember that your brain has seen a threat and your ego doesn't want to contradict the identity that you already have about yourself. So now that we know this, what do you do about it? Two things. You need to be, actually kind of one thing. Your identity just needs to be something that constantly, evolves. So, boy, rain here has been on. So basically, you need to stop locking in sentences that say something like, I am, or I am not. You know, oh, I am not disciplined. I'm just not one of those people that trains for a high rocks. I'm just not one of those people that's online and builds content for people. That's just not me. All you're doing is locking in further and further what for your brain is predictable and safe. Okay, cool. Your brain's locking it in over and over again. Be loose about it. You know, so far I've not been one of those guys that trains, but who knows? I could evolve into that. Let me be curious about it. So we'll write down, be curious. And what that curiosity eventually actually should lead to is basically just deciding, and this is something that you can just do in a moment, is decide to change the story. And this part here especially usually feels a lot more complex than it needs to. And again, this is just a part of your ego and your identity protecting themselves. You can literally in this moment just tell yourself, I'm not going to believe the stories that I've told myself or that I think I've received from the world about X, Y, and Z. Like from today, I am just going to believe that I am also capable of being this healthy person that competes in the high rocks. I am also capable of building a personal brand and helping people. Like, why wouldn't I? It's kind of like, take the ego out of it. Like, what makes you so special in this world that this can't apply to you? It's actually kind of narcissistic to think that you're the special case where it just won't happen for you. And again, it's, not attacking you directly, but that's kind of just that's the self-talk you want to have, to literally just decide, I'm not believing these stories anymore. There is, no actual logical reason for why this can't change. And so you just decide. Okay, that's kind of part one to this. Like pure. Now this kind of sounds like basically, Marvin, you're saying fake it till you make it. And that is part of the key. However, let's not delude ourselves. Your brain does need actual evidence. And so this is kind of the next part that you want to build. Now, how do you build evidence for your brain that this change that you're making is actually who you are? Very simple, and we see this all the time. It's the small wins. Yeah, you literally want to view, like if this is, I don't know, how can I draw this? I don't know. If this is a timeline of you literally want to view each small win as like this new piece of literally manually rewriting who you are. So when you feel that resistance, we all know that feeling of that first workout, that first video, that first cold call, when you're learning sales, whatever it might be, Every small battle against the resistance is literally you giving your brain evidence of who you are now becoming. And if you just stick to this, eventually your brain will kind of accept, okay, I guess this is the new environment. And so in this new environment, let me now make this as efficient as possible and make sure that it's safe. Anyways, this part here, when your brain accepts it, is when the new habit is built. That's why it suddenly, eventually, going to the gym kind of just feels like something that you do. Your brain has accepted the environment. You've got enough evidence that it accepts that this is part of who you are. So it will try and make that easier for you, or it does at least not spend as much energy in that decision to go or in that workout itself to keep it going. You kind of get the gist here, you know? So yeah, in the beginning, it will just be tough. You will literally have to manually rewrite new evidence, new code for your brain to now show it who you are. And the great thing is that eventually it will actually work in your favor. Once you've built up this habit, like I said, your brain will then actually help you protect that good habit. So, and then eventually it will actually work in your favor, because like I said, your brain doesn't know the difference between positive or negative. So once you've built up this good habit, your brain will actually help you preserve that and keep it in place. And so to close out, as a rule of thumb again, just remember, comfort or comfortable will always be what you've been up until this point. Discomfort will always be something that you're trying to become. And you know that, and so based on that, you know that if you're trying to make changes for the better, more times than none, they will just feel uncomfortable, and that's exactly how it's supposed to be. So it's all good. Your brain is doing its job. A key part of this is you don't need to just completely remove who you are right now. You just need to stop obeying it. Stop telling yourself this is just, how I am is how I am, and that's just the way it's going to be. No, like your identity, your brain will reprogram itself, and you can become this completely new version of yourself. If you like this kind of content, you know what to do. In the description, I'm probably going to put a link to the book where I got some of this advice from. As always, I hope it helps you, bro. God bless.